Picking up from last week's video, this week's offering is extending the questions that we started looking at last week. So if we as human beings were genetically modified by basically extraterrestrials, then where does that leave us in terms of being divine beings and having a connection to something far greater than ourselves? Hi, Reverend Grace here. Okay, so yeah, well done if you made it all the way through the end of last week's video. Crikey, I didn't. Yeah, sometimes these things just get too much. And this week, I've been slightly more organised, but you can see how many tabs there are. Like, again, this is a lot to get through, and then I've reflected back on last week's video and I've got notes in there. I've got another notebook here. I've got a couple bits in the Bible to review. Oh, there's a lot to get through again. And I have been away to a fantastic weekend in Glastonbury at the Megalithomania conference. Now, if you have any interest at all in ancient stones, standing stones, and dolmens and ley lines, and there was a girl do a brilliant, Juliet, somebody put the name here, doing a talk on mushrooms and megaliths, and yeah, it was great. And I just had a fantastic weekend. The weather was brilliant. We did a full tour, some of us, on Friday afternoon with Paul Weston, going around the Abbey and going up the tour and all his local knowledge. Oh, it was just flipping glorious. But anyway, that is by the by. So, no, I don't want that one first. So even though I've marked this, there's so many here, I've not put them in order, but let's try and be clickety-click quite quick today. Okay, so last week's video started off sort of with ETs. This is Jason Somoza. He's talking to Colonel Carl Now, a US guy. He's speaking, he looks like he's speaking at a conference. Okay, and he says, non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing, and there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that. And it's Deputy CTO of the North, Grumman. I don't know what that is. It's one of the world's biggest defence and aerospace companies. Oh, that's me trying to write a name. I don't know what it is. So yeah, it's always interesting, I find, when you've got these guys that, especially in the US military, they're really stepping up now and saying, I think they've had enough of it, really. I bet they've seen so many things over the years. And a lot of those guys are like, they're in military families. So you have the dad before them and the granddad before them. And so they will have heard the stories come through the family as well. And I should think they're probably just sick to the back teeth thinking, we're seeing this stuff all the time and no one's getting to know about it. Okay, what is this? Biblical geologist, God, technology, aliens and human origins. This is Greg Braden speaking on the Danny Jones channel. Talking about some past civilization choose technology instead of humanity. I think maybe that should say. Talks about John Mack's study. Another study showed that abductions were not aliens from another world, but they are us from another time. They are us from the past coming back because because in the past we gave our humanness to technology, hence the abstraction of sperm and eggs, that they can merge humans back into their existence. So basically, he's saying that these are ones that they're from the past, time traveling forward. Although actually, with the whole quantum physics things and past, present, it's a kairos is like our fixed time, but actually there's chronos, like there's it's a different thing of time. And physicists have shown this. Again, I've said this before. Hopi Indians, past, present, and future is all running at the same time. So basically, yeah, years ago, humankind in one of the civilizations that's lived on this planet, the technology got so advanced, like here we are today with the same sort of thing. Humans got a bit too smart for themselves, I think, and they basically exchange their humanity, their soul part, their divine connection part for technology like we have now. Oh God, somebody was saying yesterday, Pam Gregory on a video, she said how many people especially in Japan are volunteering to, by their thousands, to have chips put into their hand that are all very convenient and everything, and in medicine it's a magical thing if someone's lost a limb and we're now able to give them a limb and connect it to the brain, like the hand moves like a human hand. It's amazing that we can do this. But I think even when the mobile phones started with the little, you see taxi drivers with them and they have the little thing around the ear. I mean, God knows what that amount of, not Wi-Fi, but do you know what I mean? Like I don't know the word for it. You know what I'm saying? The bad juju, that's like the wavelengths, 5G and all that. But you've got it like on the side of your head. And I just thought, remember, I mean, Madonna headsets were one thing. I used to think that I wanted to work in McDonald's when I was a teenager because maybe I could do the drive-thru and I could wear a Madonna headset. But when I saw the taxi drivers, what is this, like in the early 2000s? Was it the end of the 90s, early 2000s? And I'm thinking, oh my God, even then I was thinking, wow, they're like getting to be robotic. So yeah, these guys are coming back, and that's why there's the abductions, that this guy's got this theory, because they're trying to get away from their, is it transhumanism? Or, where you've given up your human thing over to being robotic or machine or, so anyway, both studies are saying the same thing. There's something about us that is worth preserving. The ability for emotion and ability to conceive, not be asexual. I've put in brackets, history repeating itself, part of the cycle. Yeah, again, so it's whether things just go round and round, but they come back because they're not going like this, they're going more like this. So it's a spiral kind of a thing. It's history repeating itself, but it's slightly different each time. Who knows? Maybe these abductions are about trying to preserve them or trying to come and tell us in some cases. Oh, and I mentioned in the first video the guy Billy Meyer in Switzerland, and he, well, this is a bit about it. So this is from Billy Meyer Books, is the channel. Who is Billy Meyer? In 1975, a group of highly evolved beings began contacting Billy. These beings are from a planet called Era. It's in the star system of Pleiaron, therefore the people are Pleiarians. A female Pleiaran by the name of Samjessa first contacted Billy in January 28, 1975. Now, the interesting thing about that is I also spoke in the last one about Israel Anderson. I'd put in a clip of his video, and let's just look at, so Billy Meyer is the guy who, he wasn't the one to find these texts, ancient texts that have been translated into German from Aramaic and then into English here. And they have been studied heavily by a lot of really top guys, especially Dr. John Deardoff, who actually gave up. He retired from his whole professorship to study, Jim Deardoff, to study this book and really see whether it had some merit and some reality. And he really actually stands by it. So there was a thing in here, the baptism of Jesus. So this is effectively either the precursor to the book of Matthew, or it's what the book of potentially is. I don't think this says it, but it's the book of Matthew. Where does it say it on the back of here? I said this last time. I'm bloody fannying around now. Anyway, it's the same as the book of Matthew, but you really notice some differences. Watch the other video, you'll see it. But one thing I suddenly realised today when I was going back through the videos is, let's have a look at this image a minute. This painting of the Baptism of Christ by Ernst de Gelder is circa 1710, and there are two odd things about this image. Number one, the scene is nowhere near the River Jordan or any water, and where the dickens did Gelder get the idea to paint a disc like this above the scene? What could be seen by today's eyes as a metallic light dropping from the sky? This does not look like the Spirit of God descending, as it says in Matthew's Gospel, or as is typically depicted in contemporary paintings such as this one, Battesimo di Gesù by Giovanni Toccari. Now, this book wasn't discovered and put out. It was discovered by Billy in 1963 because he, in a weird way, he was connected with the guy who found these texts, who sadly is now dead. He was somebody from Israel or from Afghanistan, from somewhere over there. I can't remember the guy's name. Anyway, the weird thing is that this only came out in 1663, but that painting is done in 1710. And it's not what the Bible says. So let's read what Matthew says. Baptism of Jesus, it is Matthew chapter 3, we'll start from verse 13. Then Jesus, oh no, glasses. This Bible, it does my eyes in. I just have to, sorry, snacking my glasses case. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John, but John tried to deter him, saying, I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me? And Jesus replied, let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness. Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At the moment, heaven was opened. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, this is my son whom I love, and I am well pleased. Now, I've heard some people talk about, and I can't remember, wasn't John Davis? Or was it John Marshall? Somebody who goes through the biblical texts. And they really dug into this language of how it was interesting, anyway, just in the Bible version, that he went up out of the water. Now, again, we can say this is like how it's translated and how it was said in oldie English or oldie worldy ancient Hebrew. But yeah, I'll try and find the thing and we'll put it in a video here one day. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. So alighting, it's spelled as in a light, as in light bulb, or, you know. But just reading it then, it made me think of alighting as in going on a train, alighting onto a vehicle. So this in this one, this is chapter 3, verse 28 in the Talmud. But Emmanuel answered him, let it happen so now. But yeah, John refused to do the baptism. And Jesus is saying to him, let it happen so now, because it is fitting for us to fulfill all justice, since we were both sons of the earth. So John consented and baptized him. When Emmanuel had been baptized, he soon came out of the water of the Jordan, and behold, a metallic light dropped from the sky and descended steeply over the Jordan. Consequently, they all fell to their faces and pressed them into the sand, while a voice from the metallic light spoke. This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. He will be the King of truth, so will lift this human race to knowledge. Behold, after these words, Emmanuel entered into the metallic light, which climbed into the sky. So we're talking surrounded by fire and smoke and passed over the lifeless sea. So we're talking UFO, some kind of craft. We're talking, you know, by the Jordan, biblical times. What the dickens is that all about? And yeah, so you can see in that image, how did the artist in that year, because this wasn't discovered until, yeah, you know what I'm saying. Well, there's a thing. There's a thing. So then it went into looking at ETs in the Bible, which I only found, I think I've got more notes to write, or I can't find one of my notebooks or something, because I was surprised not to find more notes on this. Okay, so this is the Best of Jordan Maxwell channel. What religion didn't want you to know. So yeah, Jordan is speaking. The gods said, "Come, let us make man in our image after our likeness." The correct way to understand this is to let us make man in our image after our likeness, not make man. Man was already here. So come and let us remake man, do it again. Let us make man according to our image and our likeness. So the ancient Jews, Hebrews, and ancient civilizations back to Sumeria understood what was being said. If you go back to the Sumerians, Canaanites, Akkadians, Babylonians, Phoenicians, Egyptians, ancient Greeks and Romans, they all understood that we are a creation of another entity. We are a creation of the gods. According to the work of Zecharia Sitchin, the Sumerians are saying that ETs came here from a planet called Nibiru. According to the Sumerians, Nibiru was a planet about 2 times the size of Earth. As part of our solar system, but has a huge elliptical orbit, not a round orbit. And consequently, according to the Sumerians, and now we're beginning to scientifically find proof out that he was right. The Sumerians were right. The US Navy have even commented now there seems to be more than one other planet connected to our solar system in elliptical orbits. Well, that's what the Sumers were saying, and consequently this orbit is every 3,600 years it comes back into our vicinity and passes through our solar system. Consequently, mankind every 3,600 years, which 3, 6 makes 9. 9, everything, when you're into numbers, anything that goes back to 9, lots of numbers are significant for all kinds of reasons, but 9 seems to be, again, I've said this before, it makes me think of 369. Tesla, he had a real big thing about that. It's all part of that. And consequently, mankind every 3,600 years seemed to make massive movements on the earth. Now new things, new technology, all of a sudden things just start happening. Why? I believe that there is at least enough evidence to show that there might be something to this story. All these ancient civilizations and these ancient people said that the gods told them that every 3,600 years they come back through. So they would drop off and see how everything how everything is going and drop in with some new concepts. Jordan Maxwell, really interesting guy. I'm not entirely sure he's still alive. He might be. But anyway, there's lots of videos with him speaking, and he's an interesting guy. What have I got here? So when you understand that there is an ancient lineage of theology and religion that connects to governance, because in the ancient world, kings and rulers were always occupying different positions at the same time. Ancient kings were always, of course, the head of the kingdom, but they were also the communication with the gods. So consequently, whatever the king did, he had a divine right because he was in with the gods. We still have such things today who think that they have a God given right to rule over human families. Somewhere along the line, I believe there's going to come a time when the divine presence in the universe that we call God is going to show itself. And when it does, it's not going to be anything you've even anticipated. And this thing of gods, the kings having like a divine right. So back in Egyptian times, people are saying, oh, they thought they were gods. Now that's either because they were actually what I was thinking when I was a kid was a god, was something, because there seem to be so many gods, and I'm thinking when I was a kid, how can there be all these gods? Like, they must just be people that have come from the sky, because actual God we think is in the sky. So even when I was a kid, I had a notion that they were ETs. But I didn't think they were ETs. So it does make me think of the Chinese rulers, and I'm sure it was the same in Japan, different places. You were a king until the divine power basically said, you're not king anymore, you're not fit to be king. And then you were ousted one way or another because someone else was divinely supposed to be king. It was something they took very seriously. Yeah, and there is some wording and stuff even in the or some rituals in the our current coronation service that are harking back to this. And don't even get me started on the fact that Queen Elizabeth II's, which is then King Charles's lineage, goes right back to David, King David. There's an amazing family tree that shows this connection, and there's something to do with the throne of David. And then also at Stonehenge, there is the altar stone and the whole thing of the New Jerusalem in, is it at Glastonbury Abbey or, anyway, whole nother thing. Let's not go down there today. It is my belief that we have not, this is Jordan Maxwell again, it is my belief that we have not even come to know God. We have not even come to near to understanding the implications of what it is in the Bible. I don't think anyone has the whole truth on anything, and I think we learn every day from people, and the Bible says we learn from children. Even a child would lead us. Children will tell you something, and most off-the-wall things about you that are hit right on target. Yeah, kids and their amazing kind of capacity for intuition and seeing through stuff. Oh, this is Jacques Vallée's most controversial UFO theory, part 1. So Jason, is Jason the guy on the video? Anyway, he's reading a bit from Messengers of Deception, UFO Contacts and Cults by Jacques Vallée. So Jacques Vallée is saying, it doesn't matter anymore whether flying saucers are real or not. It still matters to me, of course, as an individual scientist. I have often stated that I still believe today that UFOs are real and technological. When I say that, it doesn't matter whether they are real or not. I am speaking of their social impact. You can find some scholars who will prove to you that the supernatural powers of Jesus Christ never existed. You can also find scholars who will prove to you that they did exist. Does it matter? Of course not. It only matters to the experts who have staked their academic reputations on either side of the argument. Yeah, that's that doesn't it? The effects of the belief in Jesus Christ, the impact of the doctrine based on the story of his life and death are real enough. Socially, historically, the consequences are beyond question. I claim that the same now applies to flying saucers because enough people believe in them, enough people believe that the contact with them is possible, and enough people even believe that they have secretly achieved such contact. It is too late for science. The social, historical and political consequences of the spreading belief in the contact with space are here, and they are real, no matter how ludicrous and bizarre they may appear. Yeah, it's literally like, what's that thing called when it, not a majority, when it reaches a tipping point? Like, you're almost the mad one not to have some sort of understanding or belief or concept of ETs and intelligence now. So then Jason, the guy from the video, is saying, the point he makes about Jesus is so pertinent. I don't know whether you believe Jesus was real. People have a difference of opinion about that, of course. Whether you believe he was the Son of God, whether you believe that he was just some teacher, maybe a historical figure, maybe you don't think he existed at all. But actually, does it matter? In the Time list, as in the Time magazine, list of 100 most influential people of all time, Jesus is listed as number 1. So even if you believe he doesn't exist, the reality of him is bigger than his historical existence. I mean, in the case of Jesus, we literally define BC and AD on when he was born, as in, you know, dates. Because now, of course, we have before Common Era and oh yeah, and Common Era. I was trying to think what the other thing was. And you can still use both. It's not that you don't, it depends what context. You can still use BC and AD. Lots of people are using BCE and CE, but I'm a BC AD fan myself. but I'm not a scholar, so I don't have to use different what's-its. Back to Valles, Jacques Vallée. He's saying, I propose that the UFO we see is, among other things, a device which creates distortion. Now, this is interesting. Device which creates distortion of the witness's reality, that it does so for a purpose, which is to project images or fabricated scenes designed to change our belief systems, and that the technology we observe is only the incidental support for a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction. I believe there is a machinery of mass. That makes me think of when, what's his name? What is he called? He's got hair. He fully loves Jesus right now. Russell Brand. He did a video quite a few years ago, and it was about this subliminal messaging thing. And he was looking at, in particular, opening ceremonies of the Olympics and how, the way they show that things are being shown to us in mass world events that lots of people are watching, and their tableaus, their images, there's messages behind it, and they're putting it in plain sight. And he broke down this whole thing, and there's a psychology, I think, behind it, and all sorts. Interesting. But anyway, I believe that there is a machinery of mass manipulation behind the UFO phenomenon. It aims at social and political goals by diverting attention from some human problems and by providing a potential release for tensions caused by others. The contactees are part of that machinery. They are helping to create a new form of belief, an expectation of actual contact among large parts of the public. So yes, we're being drip fed this thing as if, like, you know, it really is going to happen. Then you've got the other theory saying, I mean, there's always multiple theories, isn't there? But the other one is saying, you know, that this is our past ancestors who gave up their humanness for technology and to become sort of techno-humans, and they wish they hadn't, and now they're abducting us for sperm. And I mean, who knows? So this is just a different look on it, obviously. In turn, this expectation makes millions of people hope for the imminent realization, that age-old dream, salvation from above, surrender to the greater power of some wise navigators of the cosmos. There are some things like, say, Next Level Soul podcasts, people that speak on there, or Buddha at the Gas Pump, or different. I'm not necessarily these are exact the ones, but it'll be on channels like that where there are people that say there's no one coming to rescue us anymore. And yet there's lots of others that are speaking from US military and saying, oh yeah, you know, they're giving us technology and they're trying to give us a helping hand. And of course, we're talking about UFOs, and we always think of them as being in the sky, and it could be that they come from another planet, and obviously originally they were off planet, but that actually they've been with us for a very long time, under ocean bases, up mountains, all sorts. And if you think you can't hide a thing in the world anymore, there's the Giant of Kandahar, when some US military went out in the Iraqi war, and they lost contact with them, so they sent out the next lot to go and find, and they found their colleagues all dead, ripped up and being eaten by this ginormous, like 12-foot manny type enormous thing, and they blasted him with bullets and killed him. And then other military saw the crate that came, or the what's that thing called? Pallet that came, and they said the body odour was just chronic and the smell of stench of death. But yeah, it was enormous, this giant, literally a giant. God, I'm going off on tangents. I'm trying to stick to the notes. Anyway, and later on we'll hear him build on this, where he talks about the idea that we need to get away from thinking about flying saucers, UFOs, as craft designed to get ET beings from planet A to planet B. Instead, Vallée sees them as craft designed to get a person's mind from one state to another state. So this isn't about space travel it's actually about mind travel, mind alteration. Off the back of this, the next question to ask is, what is the social impact of the UFOs having? How is it changing people's minds, belief systems, and therefore how can we understand the motivation and intentions of this phenomena? and the beings or people behind it? And Vallée answers this question in his book. He looks at many different cases of people who've had contactee experiences with these beings and what they've begun to believe and what they've begun to do. He also looked at examples of people having mystical experiences through cult organisations as well. And this is quite important. Vallée doesn't just see the UFO phenomenon as just a disc in the sky and its beings inside. He sees it as a part of a broader set of mystical experiences and how they affect us in modern day history, but also ancient history. And having looked at all these experiences, Vallée puts it down to 4 different social consequences of how this phenomenon and people's experience of it is changing them and changing the culture around them and starting to change society too through contact experiences. Let's read on a little bit more, because this is social impact number 1, Mark 1. Intellectual abdication. The contactee propaganda undermines the image of human beings as masters of their own destiny. The belief in UFOs widens the gap between the public and scientific institutions. Irrational motivations based on faith are spreading hand in hand with the belief in extraterrestrial intervention. So the irrational motivations based on faith are spreading hand in hand with belief in extraterrestrial intervention. Jason says, he's the guy doing the video, Jason says how later in the book Vallée builds on this, and he goes on to quote this next related bit of the book. The widespread belief that human beings are incapable of solving their own problems and that extraterrestrial intervention is imperative to save us in spite of ourselves. The danger is such a philosophy is that it makes its believers dependent on outside forces and discourages personal responsibility. This is pretty key. Why should we worry about the problems around us if the gods from outer space are going to solve them? Fair one. Jason then questions, as we see our world fall apart, do we think if they land, are they going to save us? And he mentions a myth that in 2027 they are going to come and we'll all see. Oh, next year. Wow. So it makes us think, oh, what's the point investing, making change? It makes us passive to think, oh, they'll be back and sorting this out. Social impact number 2, racist philosophy. The pernicious suggestion that some of us on Earth are of ET descent and therefore constitute a higher race. The dangers inherent in this belief should be obvious to anybody who hasn't forgotten the genocides of World War II executed on the promise that some races were somehow purer or better than others. So whether there really actually is, like the Merovingians, the Blue Bloods, that there is a blood type that is, alien, it's not of this world, of which, funnily enough, I happen to have that blood type. I only found that out when I was pregnant, because if you have rhesus negative blood, you have to have some injection afterwards if you have is it if you just have a daughter, or is it if you have a kid that's, I think it's if you have a kid that's the same blood or different blood. Anyway, there is a thing. And I guess so. What I'm trying to say is, if there are some videos and presentations will tell you that these people that are like way high, like 33rd degree of Masonic organisations or secret societies, the real sort of, like some would say, oh, Epstein was right up there, or he was a wannabe. I heard someone saying in conversation yesterday that the day before, Yahweh that Epstein wanted to be, he wanted to be the next, gold thingy of the golden age. What was he called? The awful guy. scary photo. Nah, no, can't remember. Oh, bloody hell. I'll put the name down. Anyway, so yeah, it could be that actually, yeah, I always think there's a minority. Now, whether those people at the top of these things in this secret sort of family or unit or whatever that's like this world order that's running, you know, the whole show behind the scenes. Now, whether they are Merovingians or whether they are reptilian or whether they are alien based and they're all crooked and they're all evil, or whether in actual fact they're just humans like myself, whether rhesus blood or not rhesus blood, and they're just greedy bastards that just think, and because they're so wealthy, you're not living in the real world. You're just not. So I can imagine how your thinking can get out of hand. Yeah, I don't know which is which, but I would say that there would be some that might be looking at this, but they're more the star child, sort of rhesus negative, not seeing themselves as better, and actually just trying to do good in the world, trying to elevate consciousness and have us all living in love and, you know, brr. So anyway, this goes on and on, but this video is also going to go on and on if I bloody keep reading these bits. So let's move along. So then this thing of ETs creating man. There's a few of these tabs. Let's have a look what is in this book. This goes back to sort of a bit of the sort of, yeah, not us being created, but this is Paul Wallace speaking on Your Superior something or other channel. I haven't quite finished the heading there, obviously couldn't read it. He revealed the Bible's connection to secret societies video. And the interviewer asked Paul, what are your thoughts on our consciousness? Like, how does our consciousness differ from theirs? Talking about ETs. And Paul says, I actually think that the human experience of consciousness is of great interest to many of our visitors. So, for instance, in Genesis 6, there is a hybridization narrative where it says that we are being observed by beings who are not human, but who found human beings very attractive. And I don't think that that was just a physical thing necessarily. We're both fans of Plato, and so to answer this question at a more fundamental level, I go to his explanation of where everything came from. His belief was that the consciousness preceded the material universe, and that in the material universe exists an order for the primordial consciousness to express itself and express itself and have experiences. And if you put nuts and bolts on the idea, which sounds very sort of airy-fairy metaphysical, if we turn that into something more physical, what we're talking about here is the theory of panspermia. And the theory of panspermia says that the genetic coding of biological consciousness, conscious life, is as much a property of the cosmos and the property of light and properties of gravity. This life in the cosmos is the norm rather than the exception. That whenever that genetic coding lands in a hospitable environment, essentially meaning a planet with water, it will generate forms of life similar to the ones we're familiar with on planet Earth. So if you can just run down that avenue for a moment and think what that looks like, it means there's a lot of life in the cosmos, that all of that life is ultimately related and has similarities, but of course every planetary environment will have unique aspects. It will be a different size, different gravity, the atmosphere will be slightly different. And then the interviewer asked, do you think we were created by God or ETs? And Paul says, well, going back to Plato, I think all life emanates from the genetic coding of biological conscious life that is endemic to the cosmos. So we are part of that creation the same way that the stars are, in the same way that the space is. We are the result of consciousness wanting to have an experience. So in that sense, nobody created us other than the source. However, I think if we study the history of the emergence of Homo sapiens, we are looking at a species that has been adapted by visitors. So in just the same way that we are now, working on genetic modification of crops and of animals. I think we had a little work done too. But that's not to say ETs are creators, just that we've been modified and adapted through the ages. And I point to yes, I've read this bit in the previous video actually. Sorry, I'm repeating myself now. What is this here? Right, this is Daily Dose of Wisdom. This is a neurosurgeon, Dr. Michael Egnor speaking. And he said, I found that the way to understand the human soul, which began with Aristotle and St. Augustine, I think culminating in St. Thomas Aquinas, really was the best way to understand the mind and brain, that we do have souls, and it actually fits the neuroscience as well. So yeah, then the interviewer says to Dr. Michael, and if you wouldn't mind, just to distill some of the main lines of evidence from your book, what would be certain things that you've come across during your studies? And Dr. Michael says the conclusion that all of the mind comes from the brain is actually a very radical claim, and there simply isn't any evidence for it in neuroscience. In fact, the evidence points in quite the opposite direction, and the ancient philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventure, they all knew this just from logic. You don't need neuroscience to know that there are aspects to the mind, specifically abstract thought, that don't come from the brain. Plato knew that, but there's modern neuroscience that really backs that up, and it tells of the same thing that the ancient philosophers were telling us. The first really clear example of this, I think, was Wilder Penfold's work. So Penfold, he started off being a materialist and, not believing anything other. And he studied people that were having seizures, but in particular, he studied ones that had partial complex seizures. And that meant that they were conscious during the seizure. And that meant that he could ask them questions and test things. And he was testing parts of the brain that were being activated. So you might have like a limb uncontrollably moving, sort of a thing. And what he found was that actually completely turned around his way of thinking on consciousness and the mind. He uses the word mind, but it says here later that he actually, by mind, he means soul. I don't know if he means spirit, but you could say soul, spirit, same thing. Again, we all use terms differently, don't we? Or have a different understanding of them in our own belief system and knowledge base and how we use that. So he basically found that abstract thought was nothing to do with, now it says here somewhere, there are some seizures where people will get memory. The only thing that happened in seizures are movement, perception, memory, and emotion. Never abstract thought, never reasoning, never having concepts, never having free will. So Penfold said that's awfully strange because we spend most of our waking hours thinking abstractly. Why does that never show up when the brain gets stimulated by a seizure? And he said, well, the simplest and most obvious explanation for that is that the kind of thinking doesn't come from the brain. That's why it's never elicited by a seizure. And then this guy, Dr. Michael Egnor, he found the same thing in his neuroscience research work that he did. So the brain is not necessary for the normal expression of those thoughts. There is a connection or something happening from somewhere else, or something invisible that is not the brain. Sandy Sedgwick channel, Debunking the Bible, Ancient Texts, Modern Insights with Father Sean Mayer and Paul Willis. And Paul Willis is speaking here. And he says, Plato goes into some detail as to how he uses the word God, and it's in a number of different ways. But when you get to his ultimate concept of God, the source of the universe, and drill down into it, it seems that he's talking about what we would describe as the unified field of consciousness, and that consciousness preceded the material universe. And when I rediscovered that in Plato, that really started ringing bells with me. And he argued that the whole of the material cosmos is an emanation of that consciousness, that it exists in order for the divine source consciousness to express itself and experience itself. And having rediscovered Plato, I then went back to the Apostle Paul, and I realised that at his highest moments, where he's going deepest into clarifying his terms, his thoughts were not so different to Plato. And so we find that coming out, on it goes. Paul, is talking to a non-religious audience, non-Jews, non-Christian. So Paul has to clarify what he means by theos, the Greek word for God, and he gives pretty good explanation of the Greek understanding of God. And he says, by theos I mean the source of the cosmos and everything in it, that in which we all live and move and have our being, of which we are all offspring. Yeah. So, if you made it to the end of last week's video, I was trying to look at, maybe I should put the bit in here, but the Trinity, which Israel Anderson and lots of other scholars say there is no Trinity mentioned in the Bible, but there is a real, I'll put in a little clip here from, like, I'll come back to the Druids, like in the Celtic times in Britain, or Britain as it was in ancient times, which is basically England and Wales and a little up into like a little bit of Scotland, sort of an area. And there, obviously, the Druids were also Scotland and Ireland. How they were ready for Christianity in the sense, they were primed for it really, because they already had their Trinity.
The Druidic Trinity carried three aspects corresponding to God's relationship with time. Beli the creator, the past; Taran the savior, the present; and Isis, Yesu, the renovator and recreator, the future.
Yeah. There's something about the Trinity, and there's something about the number 3, and I'm not talking about the Roman Catholic one, I'm talking about the power of 3. In numerology, it's creation, and that's, I wonder if that has spawned from this thing of consciousness, ground of all being, that created the unified field. It's the same, one in the same. The one split into 2 to experience itself, and then the next experience was those 2 splitting into a 3, making a third. That's creation. That's like being those new parents, having their firstborn. That's the same in numerology. There's other words, communication and thing. Jupiter is number 3, and that's communication planet. And also in, say, tarot, 3 is creativity for many. So yeah, there's something about the, and also there's good old Tesla, with his 369. So this Father Sean now speaking in this same conversation, he thinks planet Earth has been the same thing with different ET energies coming here with different agendas. And question is to whom are we going to listen? And what are the agreements among these people? What's the balance of power among these sky beings? How much latitude are the dark forces going to be allowed? They certainly seem to be calling the shots for the last 10,000 years. So the question is, are they going to be reined in at this stage, or are we going to call in ourselves? And to call in, I think we need to understand who we really are, because as long as we identify with 3D beings, we are powerless against these guys. When we realise that we have volunteered to incarnate on a 3D planet where we in fact are fractals of Source itself, and a holographic is an entity that contains the totality of itself and every one of its component parts. And a fractal is a pattern that repeats at an infinite number of scales. So every single one of us actually is a bite-sized piece of God. So until we elevate our self-understanding, then we're kind of under the thumb of what appears to be higher entities, more intelligent beings, more powerful beings, but they're not more powerful. I think out of the real love to temporarily forget, does that say right? I think out of the real love to temporarily forget who we really are in order to have a nostalgia for home and work our way back through the seerskoff or physical body to the etheric, to the astral, to the mental and to the psychic, to the soul body until we merge finally with God. We're absolutely powerful beings, and we're not going begging for assistance from people who are more powerful than we, but rather we are going as equals, not disidentifying now with lesser versions of ourselves in order to re-identify with greater versions of ourselves. And that's why I think of Mother Mary. I created this statement a few days ago when Mary said to the angel Gabriel, "Your will be done." She created the first currency, and the currency was love, but the price for the currency to be willing to give birth to God, and that's our job. Every single one of us is, as Meister Eckhart said so powerfully in the 1800s, every single one of us is meant to be a mother of God. And so until we identify with that level of ourselves, we're beggars looking for help from more powerful beings. So again, it's not taking responsibility, it's thinking Messiah's coming, these things are going to come from the planet Nibiru when it swings back round here and everything's going, which could be 2027 according to somebody, and yeah, it's all going to be groovy. They're going to save us. There would be other people that it's been brought into our realm of consciousness through Hollywood films, that Mars Attacks and others since, that, you know, aliens are going to come and everyone's just going to shoot them up and it will be, and then, you know, well, that's not very welcoming. And what's going to happen then? Oh yeah, this is a really nice note actually. Paul Wallace ends on, in this particular video, he ends on, "It was a very complicated world where somehow you had to calculate what God wanted and didn't want, and everything has that anxiety undergirding it. Am I doing it right? Am I heading in the right direction? I think to put all that to one side, you're here to have experiences. Have the best experiences that you can. You're here to learn, love, experience it, do it at its best. You're here to learn, to love, experience it and do it as best you can. And I think that is a great starting point to go at life with more confidence and more courage to have a better human experience." Yeah, so not getting all freaked out and worried and losing your what's it. Okay, what is this? This is Jordan Maxwell again. This is what religion didn't want you to know about Elohim. So we're back to that video. This is a later bit. Jordan saying, "It, whatever it is, but it's there. If you choose to call it God or the divine," incidentally, the word divine comes from the idea that the grapes, the red wine, that represents the blood, and the blood represents life, and it came from the vine. So that's why blood comes from the divine. Vine, doesn't matter what you call it, divine, Holy Spirit, Great Father, that presence in the universe. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever that there is a higher power in the universe that watches these circumstances between races in its great creation. And I would suggest that all of us, the way to protect yourself is the way the scripture said to do and the way the New Testament admonishes to do it. And that is to verbally, audibly talk to the Spirit as if the Spirit was a very intelligent, powerful man or woman talking to a very powerful dignitary. Be very specific in what you want to say. He's saying, ask once, don't go on. Just ask and leave it there. So this next one is taking us, this is the Kaufman Interfaith Institute, and it's Elaine Pagel's doing a presentation. So I'll come in halfway through the sentence here, that's where the note starts, so I'm just going to read it as is. "Remain when you come into your kingdom, and he says you will be with me today in paradise," and that suggests that the kingdom of God is understood as heaven. There are different interpretations in the New Testament Gospels about what the kingdom of God is. There's a whole range of suggestions, but there isn't a single answer to that question. It's a mystery, and that's why Christianity still debate it. Is it the church? Is it the presence of Christ among us? Is it what? is it the coming of eschaton, which refers to the final event in divine plan, eschaton, or the end of the world, in theology represented the culmination of history, the last judgment, and the establishment of a new reality. It's derived from the Greek eschaton, which means last thing. It signifies the ultimate goal of history and the defeat of evil. There's this primordial divine energy, and the only appropriate metaphor for the energy of God, or the energy of the divine that created the world, is light. This extraordinary immaterial medium. Yeah, it's coming back to light. So when I was trying to, at the end of the video, the last one, where I'm looking at the Trinity, or I'm at least looking, if Jesus was man, God, God, man, whatever, down here on earth, something just a teacher, something didn't exist. But if he was really here, and we're trying to say what was he, like just gain an understanding of him, it looks like, you know, he was sent by God. He says he's sent by God. You could say we're all sent by God, but there was definitely something different about him as a teacher, trying to teach us the stuff of, you know, you can be like me, you can do amazing things like me. It's us not using our part of our brain and our things, like Father Sean is saying, you know, we're bowing down to other beings that are coming off planet, when actually, you know, we're not realising not the status that we really have, but the potential of who we are as beings. So I'm trying to drill into this. So there's Jesus, and then if Jesus is the full emanation of God in human form, and then, you know, there's the Yahweh in the Bible and Elion in the Bible. Is Elion the God that is Jesus's father? Now that's confusing, because if Yahweh, who Christian churches are saying is God, but actually he isn't, it's that it strikes me from what I've seen. I've always had a wondering about the serpent. Why is the serpent the healer, fertility sign, and on the medicine stick, symbol for our modern day medicine since way back, and all that sort of a thing? How can Satan be the serpent? Or is it again that there's this good one, bad one? Anyway, Israel Anderson, I point you to the video, Two Gardens, One Snake, and any of his videos where he's talking about Yahweh is not God. And Yahweh and Jesus could potentially be brothers. They're both celestial sons. Not sure about that. Jesus is saying, oh, this is the bit that I found in the Bible. This is something that Israel Anderson talks about. Yeah, well, he must do. Yeah, John 8. Oh, glasses. Right, where is John 8? I'm going from verse 31. So basically Jesus is in the temple. The Pharisees and the guards of the temple, they're not liking it very much, because he's teaching stuff that is maybe not, you know, so kosher for them. A bit above the mark. Or is it below the belt? Anyway, no. Anyway, to the Jews who have... So this is Jesus speaking to people. To the Jews who have believed him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples, then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never been slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free? Jesus replied, very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but the son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me, because you have no room for my word. I am telling you that I have been in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father. Abraham is our father, they answered. If you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the works of your own father, Yahweh. That's their father, as in God, you know, who they're praising as God. They don't praise Abraham. Abraham was just one of the head leaders, obviously. We are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. Oh, there you go. Now that says God, but the way Christianity teaches it now is that Yahweh would be God. This is where the confusion is. Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out the father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? I am telling the truth. Why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God's heart, God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God, because they are well down the Yahweh route. And he's saying he's a murderer. Now, it's funny because I've just Googled it, and if you Google, did Yahweh kill Moses or Abraham, it says, oh, no. He was going to kill Abraham because he was going to kill his son Isaac, because Yahweh had told him to kill his own son, which is just like a weird thing to do. And then an angel came and said, no, you don't need to do that. And Moses was killed when they were about to go into the promised land, and he killed Moses's brother. Now, this is stuff that others talk about this, but it's just something I've listened to in the last few weeks that Israel Anderson has spoken about. And actually, I can't remember the other bit in the Bible, but there's another bit where Yahweh is having a conversation with someone else, and he refers back to the death of Moses, and he basically says, I think it's this, there's basically something that in scripture, in the Bible text, it clearly states that he knew where Moses' body was, and yet nobody knew where Moses' body was. So it was that Yahweh murdered Moses for tapping a rock when he shouldn't have tapped a rock, when in a previous time Yahweh had said tap the rock to do that. Anyway, yeah. Okay, and whether you want to get allegorical or metaphorical with all of that, that's for another video, because this one's getting epic proportions again. So yeah, Jesus is distancing. His father is different. Going by the information that Israel gives, Anderson gives, basically, yeah, they are not. Elion is not the father that Jesus is talking about. It's so yeah, I'm not going to get the whiteboard out today, but basically, what I might put the clip in. I'll just put the clip in now, and we'll just end on a few points. This is a non-thing. This is the frequency. This is the photons. This is the resonance, sound. Yeah, this is consciousness. This is the unified field of consciousness. It's not necessarily in a triangle. It's not necessarily a trinity, but this is the first source. This is the spark, and I think that this thing of consciousness dividing itself, I think somewhere along the way there was a sort of a God form. Part of consciousness splitting, being a non-being, just being photons, frequency, energy, sound. It formed into, at some point, some kind of Abba, some kind of dad, some kind of father. And yeah, that's very male language, but let's not get hung up on the male-female thing. This was like a androgynous, there was no male-female kind of a thing to it. Or this was the androgynous one. Jesus, God, man, God, is the most of the light being, sort of amazing energy, source consciousness in human form. This is a light being, not quite human, definitely not material. Still, we're talking, singing angels and lovely energy and everything's beautiful and sound and amazing, like heavenly things. But in a form, like a one that does actually set out. this is, human form, dense energy, but it's God in dense energy. And this is true God in light being form, able to communicate, able to, whereas this is the original source. This is the power of it all. You getting my drift? So this is a bit from the Be Here Now Network, episode 29, Philosophy of the Tao. This is Alan Watts speaking. So then you might ask, what is the nature of consciousness? No one can say because it's common to all. There's no way of isolating it. What is the colour of space? It's the same question. Or when you listen to a phonograph or the radio, everything that you hear, all the human voices, all the noises of the different instruments, the drums and everything, they're all vibrations on a diaphragm. But nowhere does the radio announce that this that you are hearing now is nothing but vibrations on a diaphragm. That is basically to everything heard, and it's taken for granted. So in exactly the same way, the Tao is the basis of everything that is going on. It's taken for granted. It is as necessary to everything that happens as the diaphragm is to the news on the radio. But we ignore it because it's common to everything. Every experience is the basis of it. Therefore, we don't notice it. Oh, this is Bill Donahue. Understanding Yourself is the video. It's actually on William Donahue channel. He's talking about someone's work or writing. I think is it Jung's? The carrier, then, that means you, of this consciousness, you and me, does not produce the psyche on his own, but is preformed by it and nourished by its gradual awakening during life. He stops reading the book. I think he's reading Jung's work. And he says, I don't know how, but this should be exciting to you as to the man we are listening to. This is a scientific genius of the mind telling you, it is Jung, telling you that yes, God exists and that he has proved it, and all life can look at it and say, yes, it does, it's proven. So what does the Bible say in Genesis 1:2? There was darkness upon the face of the earth, and Carl Jung says that development of self requires a significance whose full implications have hardly begun to be appreciated. And then he says, listen to this bit very carefully, because too much attention to external religion blocks the way to immediate inner experience. So yeah, it's there's a thing somewhere about God, looking. Oh, this is an interesting. Looking within. Jesus talks about it all the time. And Bill Donahue is one that he went on about it a lot. Look within. I mean, here's me looking without all the time, but I there are people that have done a lot of work on stuff like this, and they know far better than I. Now, this is an interesting one to round up with. This kind of, I realised as I read this note earlier, it kind of sets things all on a kilter again, but Greg Braden, he got very excited because he, anyway, I'll read it. The numbers of the atomic mass are the numbers that equate to the mysterious letters in the ancient alphabets. What that means is when you look at human DNA or DNA of any life, it is made of hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen and carbon. And using gematria, so that is the Greek number system, like Jesus is 888 when you each letter has a number. And anyway, gematria, look it up. The numbers that equate to those become 1563. So that's their atomic numbers of oxygen, blah, 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 on the table. The ancient tables, and you're able to correlate these. So when you're looking at gematria tables, you're looking at Hebrew tables, gematria and atomic mass. So I've drawn a little thing there. He's looking at the tables, he's comparing the numbers. So correlating those numbers with the letters we find is that human DNA is built of layers, and at the top layer, it's like every book has an introduction. In every cell, in every form of life, carbon-based DNA, the introduction is the same as the first translation, literally means God eternal within the body. And God that is depicted in DNA is actually spelt the way that the name of God was spelt in ancient texts before it was removed 6,800 times in the Torah, for example. The sacred name of God is believed to be so sacred it cannot be written in its entirety. So the guy asked, like, why are they putting it in code? And Greg says, so first, as a scientist, he always says, as a scientist or as a geologist, he always says that. What I have to say is this. People say, why is the code there? And I say, I don't know. All I know is that when I followed the instructions in a 3,000-year-old text and I applied it to the periodic table, this is what we have. Next question is it a coincidence? Greg asks. Oh, and then this is a little note. So, yeah, trying to depict whether Elion is God. This is Fifth Kind TV, which is Paul Wallace. The Bible is not about God. Are they still controlling us? Mara Biglino, the translator, and Paul Wallace. So it's like here. So this is humanity. This is Elion, Elohim. But Yahweh, he's only like a lower level. He's one of the junior powerful ones presided over by Elion. So there's a clue that Yahweh is not God. Elion isn't God either. He's one of the powerful ones, the most senior. Elsewhere in the Hebrew canon, we see the Sky Council in operation. We see it in 1 Kings chapter 22, fomenting war. We see it at the beginning of the book of Job, where two of the powerful ones are toying with a human being. Then there's another quote I've written here. For a long time, believers have equated Yahweh with the concept of God, because the church has taught that. And once Elohim and Elion, you realise, cannot be made, you cannot make that equation. So basically, yeah, for a long time, since childhood, I've had certain notions about things, and it's been really interesting because I let things come to me as a study, as a method of studying. I go and seek some information, but generally I let things flow to me. It's been interesting to see how the information that's come through is backed up, like, or explaining these weird notions that I've had since I was a kid. And this is an interesting thing. So this is from the same study. Now, there's a very broad scholarly consensus that the Hebrew canon took its current shape sometime in the 6th century BC. In the century before, the boy king Josiah had set out about reforming Judaism and paring it down into a neat and tidy world of monotheism, with God and the king at the top, and then the high priest and the priests, and then the people at the bottom in a nicely ordered religious society. That was Josiah's intent, and in the 6th century BC, the redactors set about doing the same reforming with the canon of scriptures themselves, taking this vast library of books and scrolls and doing a scissors and paste edit on them to give them the appearance of a seamless story of God from beginning to end, a story that teaches monotheism. And part of that redaction involved taking the name Yahweh, which by that time was understood to be a name for the Almighty God, and pasting it over the whole sequence of stories from beginning to end. And so the redactors import the name into the old stories of the Elohim. Now, if you read the Bible attentively, you can spot this, because you can see the name Yahweh in texts that precede the encounter where Yahweh gives his name. So if you've got this timeline of the Bible, here's the beginning and it goes on. And then Marrow mentioned, he mentioned this moment when Pope Benedict the 16th sent around a communication to the Catholic world telling Christians not to use the name Yahweh in Christian prayers or liturgies because it is not a Christian name for God. And then Marrow said, now just pause and think about that. The Pope is telling us there. What the Pope is telling us there. Now, Pope Benedict the 16th was probably the most conservative Pope in my lifetime, and yet he's saying something very radical. Yahweh is not a Christian name for God. Now you can take that in two ways. He could be saying it's not a Christian name for God, it's a Jewish name for God, but what's the issue there? if it's the same God that we're worshipping? Is he saying that it's not a name for God at all? And that was the conclusion we came to last time. Now the name Yahweh in the scriptures as we have them, we're talking about a final redaction. Yeah, there's still so much. Oh God, there's so many bookmarks in here. This could literally like be... Creation is the consciousness living spirit that pervades and embraces every part of the cosmos. It is infinite because it creates all space. It is eternal because it creates time rather than being subject to time. It manifests in every star, in every galaxy, and in every subatomic particle. It is all-powerful because it drives all processes throughout the universe. It is all-knowing because it is the source of all intelligence. It is alive because it is the sum total of all living things. It can appear in any form because it creates all forms. It rules the universe, including all conscious life, through its eternal laws. The cosmos contains all kinds of life forms, including God, space-travelling species, and Earth humans. God is a human being like all the celestial suns and the terrestrial humans, except that he is vastly greater in consciousness. Talmud of Emmanuel 4b verse. Gods and their space-travelling celestial sons have come here repeatedly in the past to colonise Earth and to accelerate Earth human evolution. Most recently in 12 to 13,000 years ago. Behold, God as his followers came from the depths of space and created here a new race and home with the early women, Earth women. That's Talmud of Emmanuel 188. Michelangelo's version of God and his followers creating Adam is mostly symbolic but otherwise accurate insofar that it depicts God and his celestial sons as fully human figures and arriving from the heavens. Two space-travelling humans can be found in the background of the painting of the crucifixion painted in 1350 and kept in a monastery in Kosovo. Other space beings are shown in other paintings and pictographs dated 12,000 years old. Huh. Oh my word. That is Dr. Dietmar Roth talking about the Talmud of Emmanuel. This video is going on far too long again. So this is Michael Davis, Stories of Awakening. It's the video Adam and Enoch. And Marshall, he does lovely little videos, and he's saying humans came to see themselves as separate from and different from others, and that separate ego self is the cause of all our spiritual problems, including a sense of separation from God, a sense of separation from the universe and the world and from others. That's what led to the first murder according to the story of Cain and Abel. It was the fall of man from the natural non-dualistic consciousness to self-consciousness. Christian theologians call this the fall. It is a fall into duality, represented by the tree of duality, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, as the Hebrews literally says. Fall was a shift in consciousness. It was a fall into identity with individual self. Infants are born at one with everything, God and the universe. Yeah, it always comes back to the children, which is interesting because that's what Jesus always said. Yeah, like you have to come as if a child. Oh my word, that is enough, I think. That's either bored you to death and you've not made it here, or it has some relevance on your journey. This has been years of work of studying, obviously out of my interest and my drive to do so. But it would be great if you could give a thumbs up to this video, or hit the subscribe button. You're not signing your life away. It's not costing you any money, but it's telling YouTube that I'm somebody worth listening to. Maybe at this point, hours later, I'm not. You've all gone to sleep. But this stuff is fascinating, and Yeah, so the point we're at the end of today is Jesus was definitely someone super special. He was trying to point us to consciousness. He was trying to point us to a quantum physics kind of a thing, rather than a massive church kind of a thing. It was all about making your eye single, which is going into the pineal gland, moving your state of awareness into your right side of the brain, into the sacred side, in meditation and contemplative prayer. It's about going within. And Yahweh, who the Pope Benedict XVI has now said is not a Christian, a Christian God. That's not the right name to use. And Yahweh was actually some dodgy ET that got a bit big for his boots and wasn't particularly nice to everybody. And Yahweh or Elion, that was not who Jesus was sent by. So, and I have to take it at that, because if Yahweh definitely was one of the Sky Council and he came from them, he was subordinate to Elion. As much as people say that Yahweh and Jesus were, both celestial sons, I'm not sure they were coming from the same sun, the same planet, the same father. And Jesus certainly tries to separate himself. Plus the fact that you can't say that Yahweh was Jesus' father, saying that Yahweh is God, because Yahweh never refers to having any offspring at all, whereas Jesus is constantly banging on about my father. So yeah, some people have got some confused ideas about things, but only because this is how they've been taught, because this has been the doctrine and the dogma. And now, I know some wonderful vicars and pastors and priests and ministers and all the rest of it. It's just times are changing, and it's not about being modern and radical. It's about the truth coming out. And things like the Dead Sea Scrolls were found a really long time ago, but it's taken a long time of a lot of scholarly academic work to be able to get through all those documents, translate them, let alone decipher them and interpret them, and really dig into and look at the correlations between these and ancient texts that we've already got. And everything is in its time. And Ecclesiastes 3, Ecclesiastes 23, everything has a season, everything has its time. And now we are moving into a new age. We're moving into the age of Aquarius, which you don't have to be an astrologer to have any sort of sense or interest in that, to have an understanding that is an age of an epoch of truth and clarity and rising consciousness. So yeah, if anything, maybe it's the age that's going to save us. We are going to save ourselves, but just because that is by the effect of the cosmos, what is going on cosmologically. Again, it's another huge, broad topic. And if you want to really get into learning anything about astrology and how stuff in the cosmos is affecting us, then Pam Gregory, she's your lady. So, okay. Enough is enough. Do with that what you will. Peace be with you. Thank you so much for watching.